everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and joining me from the road in Mobile, Alabama, call him our Senior Bowl correspondent, I guess, former Minnesota Viking Jeremiah Sirles, also former Buffalo Bill, still licking your wounds from the other day. That was a tough one, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about your dad the entire game. I really was. You know, I knew you were your dad. He was sitting in his chair. He was watching it, and we all thought the same things. 3 minutes left. Josh Allen has the football. Here we go. Time to go be great. And just to watch it in crumbling fashion go down again was just heartbreaking. Honestly, like Josh Allen at the podium looked like someone just beat his dog in front of him for like the fourth year in a row. Like just so sad. And I feel for those guys, but I mean, as much as it's hard to love on the Chiefs, you have to respect the greatness that we're witnessing.
No, you're right. And when Mahomes, there was a stat out there that when the other team scores at least 27 points or something, he's got the best record in the playoffs of any other quarterback that's ever done it. And he just keeps piling up more and more of these impressive games. And it really was Mahomes' effort on the ground this time, but also executing the quick passing offense. Andy Reid was in his bag, but Dalton Kincaid forever will be thinking about that ball floating through the air and not being able to come down with it in his hands. Because if he does, then I think that they are going to the Super Bowl. And when Josh Allen got the ball back, I said to my wife, I think the Bills are going to the Super Bowl. I think Josh Allen is going to do it here. And then Steve Spagnuolo. And it's so crazy because we were talking just a week ago about how offenses don't really have the best answers for all these blitzes that teams send. And when you go back and look at it, they overload one side. They don't really give it away pre-snap. And Spagnuolo just got Josh Allen on that play.
Yeah, I mean, the blitz was incredibly designed. You know, letter of the law and empty protection like that, you usually do want to slide weak, which is where the blitz came from. But with the orbit motion, I think that's something that people aren't paying attention to. When you have an orbit motion like that, where Shakir comes back into the backfield and then it comes out, it's hard on the road protection, have the timing of the motion on the silent count, be able to readjust the protection, be like, hey, no, let's go over here to the right. And they just fooled Josh, right? Josh was with his eyes elsewhere. They do a great job. They bring 4 weak. They slide away. You had 4 guys blocking 3 and 2 on guys running untouched through the B gap. But the fact that Josh actually found Kincaid and got him the football with the chance to make the catch is a miracle within itself, right? And then Kincaid had the moment to have the Tyree Stevenson helmet catch type of ball or whatever it was, like the Super Bowl was. Right. But then we're in Cancun, Mark Andrews with a little smile and a tear that ran down his face, like, it's not me anymore.
No, that's right. Yeah. And his miscues will now be forgotten. And it's on to not only Dalton Kincaid, but also spotting the football, which has been a really super fun discussion over the last couple days about spotting the football. And look, I agree with everybody else. At some point, we're going to have a digital system to spot it. I think it's a lot more complicated than just, hey, the chip's in the ball, right? But it's not on both ends of the ball. And I'm not sure that it can see through 50 bodies all piled up. And then there's the whole, well, why didn't they ask the referees after the game? And it's like, look, this play happens all the time in every single NFL game where they've got to run in there and somebody's got to make a call and they very rarely overturn it. I think for the Bills, you have to have a better answer than that. It wasn't really working in that game. Kansas City kind of figured out their tendency and how they were going to do it, and that ends up being the difference. But the thing about this Super Bowl is that a lot of people are very unhappy. It's not the matchup that they wanted. There's no clear underdog, no clear storyline. But it is the 2 best teams in the NFL. And for that part, you kind of got to give it to them. Like, this could be a classic Super Bowl because of how good these teams are.
Yeah, I mean, both these teams are incredible. We talked about all year. If the Eagles didn't have the question mark of Nick Sirianni, you'd be talking about how they were the best team in the NFL for the entire season, right? They didn't lose a game in like September, October. Like, they just rolled right along, just winning, no big deal. Oh, we dropped one to the Commanders. We'll be all right. I mean, and just putting it on the back of Saquon Barkley and going. I mean, talk about Clash of the Titans. I mean, you talk about a offensive line on both sides that run the football, wants to be physical, and then two defenses that are just completely different in scheme, right? Spags is going to dial up blitzes and bring you from everywhere. And then, as Vikings fans know all too well, the Phillies just going to sit back, let everything happen, and then just let their front four go boys, werewolves, go, right? And just run up and get there. And so it's going to be really interesting to see the mental chess game between the coordinators of Andy Reid and Fangio and Spags, right? Like, who's going to put together the best game plan to go out there and have the wrinkle that might steal the possession or steal the blitz or whatever it might be to give you that one opportunity more than the other team to go out and score.
So what is your Vikings-related takeaway from watching the two championship games? I think that a lot of people reasonably point to the Philly offensive line. My thing with the Philly offensive line is I agree, but good luck trying to emulate this. I mean, there's probably 5 examples in the last 25 years in the NFL of offensive lines that have built this dominantly that Saquon Barkley can average 6 yards a carry. So that's probably not a model. Like, of course, I'm not against it if the Vikings can sign 3 free agents that turn into this offensive line. I think I was feeling more schematic about it, of just the way Kansas City handled Buffalo and their pass rush. They essentially just took them out of the game with the quick passing that they have and the creativity. And I also felt like, too, when Patrick Mahomes has essentially never run that play ever in his career for a touchdown, and then they pull something like that out in the playoffs. It's like Andy Reid, everybody. Guy's been in the playoffs every year of his life for how long? Like, that's kind of the standard that the Vikings have to learn as they go forward with KOC, that it can't just be your offense. It's got to be stuff that is totally different when you get to the postseason.
Yeah, and the thing that I took away watching really the entire championship weekend was the return of the semi-mobile quarterback, right? I mean, Jalen Hurts obviously is a true dual threat guy, right? Jane Daniels, true like dual threat guy, but Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and those 4 guys can all create, but can also move the chains with their legs in like scramble fashion, right? And that's where I think back to JJ McCarthy. He did a lot of that in college in Michigan, just able to run. I mean, he's not a burner by any means, but he is much more athletic than Sam Darnold. He's much more athletic probably than Daniel Jones as he's getting older now, right? But if you can add the wrinkle of having that just be a threat, it changes how people rush you. It changes how people blitz you. It just changes the aspect of what the defense is looking at when you have a quarterback that you're going, he might tuck it and go for 20, right? He might not even look good doing it, but he's going to gain 20 yards, right? And so having that element of a mobile quarterback is going to be more important going forward for everyone in the NFL, right? I think back to, like, if Vince Young would be coming out right now, he'd probably kill it in the NFL, right? He was just a little bit before his time of being able to run and gun type of quarterback, right? They were kind of a very niche thing where now you're seeing more and more become a focal point of the offense. I mean, the first play of the game was Josh Allen quarterback power, right? I mean, so there's so many things that you're going to want to get to. If your quarterback can just be enough of a running threat, it just puts that much more pressure on the defense. So I do think that was the vision for JJ McCarthy when the Vikings drafted him. But now coming off the knee injury and all that stuff, how much of that do you feel comfortable doing with him, not doing with him? Sam Darnold obviously isn't that guy, but you do have Daniel Jones in the building who has rushed for a lot of yards, has a lot of time to kind of built that bigger way. So I do think that's going to be an element that'll be curious for KOC going forward as well.
That was one of my main takeaways as well, is that if you were totally envisioning JJ McCarthy being a Kirk Cousins who could every once in a while use his legs, I think it's got to be more than that. I don't think that it's enough anymore in the NFL to say, well, he's got a little bit of playmaking, because and I know this is just one playoffs, and CJ Stroud will probably win more in the future, and so will Justin Herbert. These guys are going to get their shots. But I look at the pocket quarterbacks who have some athleticism but don't really run, and they struggled a lot, especially with the power of the defensive line in the NFL. And to me, the bar was raised this year by defensive coordinators and defensive personnel up front, which sort of does transition us into another conversation about how the Vikings will construct what they have along the offensive line, because that was highlighted by Kevin O'Connell, and everybody knows it. Every single comment section, what should the Vikings do this offseason? It's just offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. So you're there at the Senior Bowl. I want to get to some free agent options for rebuilding it. But let me get a broad take from you. Would you rather have a top name as one guy, big signing, $20 million a year, or would you rather play in sort of the second wave of free agency and try to replace the entire interior of the offensive line? Folks, I found something that I didn't even know how badly I needed. It's called Rocket Money. Like everybody else, I've got so many subscriptions to different apps and websites that I couldn't keep them all straight, and it takes forever to try to figure it out unless you have Rocket Money. What Rocket Money does is organizes all of my subscriptions into one place and allows me to cancel the ones that I'm not using. No more hunting all over the place for things I'm subscribed to or getting charged for things I'm not using. I know I'm not alone in this because I learned that 85% of people have at least one paid subscription that is going unused each week. That's a lot of money being spent on nothing. With Rocket Money, you can also easily create personalized budgets with custom categories to help keep your spending on track. See your monthly spending trends in each category and know exactly where your money is going. Get alerts if bills increase in price or there's unusual spending activity or if you are close to going over budget. So you're going to want to check out Rocket Money. It is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of over $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/Purple Insider today. That's rocketmoney.com/Purple Insider. Once more, rocketmoney.com/Purple Insider.
I'm going big signing. I think you go for the Trey Smiths of the world and you get a guy in there and you lock him in there for multiple years to bring in and stabilize, whether right guard or left guard, pick your poison, whichever one you want, stabilize that position. And then I would be big proponent of bringing guys in the draft to learn from that guy, have that guy be the veteran leader in the room and groom from that way in. And then you always want to bring in the kind of tier 2, tier 3 free agents for competition and depth. Right, it's a war of attrition. Guys get beat up. Cam Jurgens can't go. Lander Dickerson has to move in. Oh, Lander Dickerson's out. Tyler Steen has to go in. They don't miss a beat because they drafted that guy, Tyler Steen. They drafted Cam Jurgens. They developed them from within the program. Now you have guys that can step in seamlessly versus taking a 1-year kind of tier 2 PFA guy to come in, or not PFA, tier 2 free agent come in for a 1-year stopgap, versus having a guy on a 4-year rookie contract that you feel really good about and just needs maybe a redshirt year in the NFL before you actually see him as a contributor. So I'm on the component of spend the money, buy the free agent guard, get him in there, settle the position, and then draft interior guys to come in and compete and develop within your system, and then let them come in year 2 or 3 and be contributors.
Well, one of the issues with the draft is that they only have 4 picks as we speak right now. And I'm sure that there are a lot of fans that would like to spend 4 straight picks on guards and just pray that one of them becomes really, really good. So I lean a little bit more toward the side of trying to spend $20 million with 3 different guys. And then, of course, you're talking about drafting. But my issue is that offensive lines end up usually becoming about the weak points, right? And as much as Tevin Jenkins or Trey Smith could change the offensive line by having one side of it be super beastly, if the other side or the middle is still soft, I think we've kind of seen this before, that opponents know that and they know who they're going to attack. So certainly if you sign Trey Smith, it could give you a super good right side of the line and a super expensive right side of the line. But my concern would be, well, are you changing its center, or is it going to be the same at center? Because that's been a weak point in pass protection. Are you going back to Blake Brandel at left guard and hoping that he's better over 17 games than he was in the first time around? Are you trying to develop Walter Rouse to play left guard? I mean, I feel like there's still some of the same questions where if you signed 3 guys that were okay, let me give you I don't know what Tevin Jenkins is going to get or what his respect is in the league, but maybe Drew Dahlman at center is a guy people like. Will Hernandez is out there. Brandon Scherff still a guy. Yeah, well,
But don't go old.
yeah.
I think that with this development, like if you're going to have a young quarterback and you're going to have a young receiving core, like you have your tackles, right? You got him. O'Neal's probably got 2 or 3 great years left in him. Then he's going to be on the back end of his slip. Darisaw is going to come back and not miss a beat, right? I have no questions about that. Don't bring in the old vet, right? Bring in year 4 or 5 that's in the prime of your offensive line, right? If you're in year 4 and 5, that's the prime of your offensive line. Physically, you've developed to where you need to be. Mentally, you've played in the league long enough to understand schemes, understand the techniques, understand what's being asked of you on a week in, week out basis. And you probably can get 3 or 4 years out of those guys into the year 7 and 8, like we've seen with the O'Neals, like we've seen with Bradbury, right? He really didn't hit his peak until year 4, maybe even year 5, right? So I don't love the idea of let's go see if Brandon Sheriff can free and save us, right? Because then you run into the issue of those guys get hurt, right? They tried doing that in Miami with Teron Armstead, right? Bring the guy in, settle the left tackle position. You're lucky if you get 12 games out of him a year. You want to bring in guys that have the longevity and have the youth on their side to develop that core from within, which is why I'm big on the draft and development. But you have to have a ton of faith in Coach Cooper, and you have to have a ton of faith in the guy that you draft is going to be willing to put the time and invest to develop themselves in the offseason. That's why so much of the draft is not just about finding the best talent, but the right personality fit that can they make it in the NFL year in and year out, go reinvent themselves in the offseason and come back a better prospect than when they left. That's why the draft isn't such an exact science. If you're going to find guys that have started a lot of games in those first few years, like a John Feliciano when they signed him in Buffalo. He only really started 1 year for the Raiders, but played well. You feel like you've got a guy in the prime of his offensive line development, right? It's just a matter of how much money are you willing to spend, right? How much money are you truly willing to throw at the offensive line and say, we need to fix our interior?
Well, and in terms of splitting the difference, even if you didn't want to go with the plus 30 type of player, maybe there's somebody like, hold on, I got my list here, like a Matt Pryor from Chicago, who's a huge dude, 6'7", 335. He was really good in pass protection. Aaron Banks is a giant guy who helped them run really effectively in San Francisco. I know Kyle Shanahan is the main reason, but Banks is just a gigantic, ginormous person who they need to be able to get some push up front. The drafting and developing, if they drafted a guard in the first round, they would get absolutely no criticism from me on it. I would be like, okay, well, there you go. The only concern is what you said about the development years, where it's like, you really need to fix this kind of yesterday. And if you draft a guy in the second round and he doesn't become very good, then you waste 2 years waiting for him to come around. And then you realize that he didn't. And then you have to bench him for Dalton Reisner. And this kind of happened even with Garrett Bradbury, where it took 2-3 years. It was really probably 3 before we saw him even get to an average level of pass protection. That drifted back a bit this year, but I mean, if you're waiting 3 years for that, when you have a roster that is ready to win, I think that's hard. I think you probably have to try to split the difference with some multi-year contract guys and also with still some draft picks that you could try to develop.
Yeah, and I don't think you go draft a guard in the first or second this year, right? I think that you make that decision when you spend the $20 million a year on a guard. You're immediately saying third round or lower on the draft, right? I mean, there is other holes on this team that need to be fixed, specifically in the secondary, right? But if you're really looking at it from a long-term perspective, which is what you have to look at it. I know we're in our Super Bowl window right now, we feel like, but I feel like we only feel that way because of the success we had this year. No one thought we were going to have the success that we had this year. There's probably going to be a bit of a step back next year, regardless who the quarterback is, because 14 wins every single year is just not sustainable unless you're the Kansas City Chiefs, right? So moving forward, looking long-term vision, you got to get depth at the offensive line position and do that. And it's such a hard thing to say and do because it's so hard and it's never an exact science, but you have to do that for the long-term health of your offensive line so that you can have, like Dallas did forever, like Philly's doing right now, like Detroit has done, they have drafted all of those guys. And then when they feel like they've drafted those guys and they have the one hole, go buy the free agent. But that's because everything else has been done internally. That's the success. That's the pattern. to be able to have. I mean, even Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith were drafted guys to Kansas City that developed quickly. It's just, that is the path, and that's what everyone wants to do, but it's a lot easier said than done.
So you're at the Senior Bowl. You got your little eyeballs on anybody that you think could look good in purple?
Yeah, I think, interiorly, Rivers from Miami had a really good day today. He played both tackle spots. He played guard spots. He used his hands really well. I thought he was a guy that had a really good practice today. Another guy is the Emory Jones kid from LSU. I don't think he quite has the length to play tackle in the NFL, but he's big, and I think he could actually be a pretty good guard. He doesn't have the arm length to play tackle in the NFL, but I think he could bump inside, and he did really good things at LSU. I think he's another good prospect to move interiorly here. Gray Zabel's another great name. He played, left tackle from North Dakota State. He's going to be another guy like Cody Mock, like Cordell Volson was, that's going to move back inside. But he played some center today as well, has that position flex interiorly on those guys, right? So there's a lot of good interior players down here. But I didn't see anyone today that I was like, that's the guy, like that's the dude. Right? I think that everyone was feeling their way out. I think tomorrow's where you usually see guys take the next step and kind of separate themselves when, some of these guys haven't had pads on since November. Right? I mean, they haven't practiced at all. So just getting their feet back under them. Tomorrow's usually we see the guys take the leaps of how to tier the guys out as you go forward.
I think also, and maybe you and I talked about this at a combine like 2 or 3 years ago, about how a lot of tackles are starting to think about the guard position a little differently, because it used to be like a slap in the face. Oh, I don't want to move inside the guard. They get paid a lot less. Well, not after last offseason. They actually get paid a lot now. And not only that, but teams have to be looking for pass protection specialists, because the differential between the D-line and the offensive line, and you get guys like Kalijah Cansey who are undersized, and you're going against them as a 335-pound dude. Well, they're getting underneath you and they're getting past you with their quickness. So it might be something that, they're trying to look at tackles who are a little undersized, maybe move them inside. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic, but I think if they were to pick a guard, most likely it's a little more toward the middle round, that comp pick, the third round, and try to develop that guy or find a gem, than it is the first round. But we've got a long way to go until the draft. So let me ask you about a couple of things that have sort of been happening. And you're typing. That's the noise is coming through there. I don't know if you realize that. You're good.
Sorry, did not know that. Heavy hands, my apologies.
It's what we call being locked in as well to the discussion. But I want to get just a take from you on Kevin O'Connell signs a multi-year contract extension, something that we fully expected. And I think having him and JJ McCarthy locked in on the same timeline is very important. But your take on O'Connell officially getting it locked up?
I'm glad it's done with. And like we talked about, I'm glad it's done early. There was no reason to drag this out. There was no reason to haggle over a few dollars here and there. Like, let's just lock our guy up, be confident in the future and the direction of our organization, who's in the front. Everyone's behind them. There's not a Jerry Jones effect of, does the owner and the coach, are they on the same page, or the GMs? Everyone, with that, as quickly as they moved after the season of getting him locked up into the contract extension, just shows how much faith they have in him, how much the team is behind him, and how much they're ready to just go, KFC, go. Build this thing however you want to build it, who you want to pick, whoever you want with it. Just go and run with it, and you have our full support. That was the exact move that the Wilfs in that organization needed to do.
I think getting it done as fast as possible after the season was important, so everybody could just focus on the offseason, and there's no thing hanging over their head. There's no rumor mill that's going on about trading him or about whether he's going to go into his lame duck year or anything like that. How about this? So it's been a couple weeks now since we all watched Sam Darnold meltdown in week 18 and then in the playoffs. Has your feelings or opinion on the quarterback position been altered at all with a little more distance from having seen that happen, and also having seen it happen to like 3 other quarterbacks in the playoffs? But where do you stand now in comparison to where you were right after the game?
I don't think I've moved much, honestly. I still think that, if you are ready and JJ McCarthy is on track, then you probably try and franchise tag Sam as a chance to trade him later. or, a chance to keep him if JJ's not where you think he needs to be. I don't think, I told you, I think it was like week 12. I was like, it's NFC Championship or bust for me to lock Sam into a long extension in purple. And that didn't happen. And it didn't happen with the question marks that we always were hoping were never going to show back up again. And on the biggest stage, they showed back up. I count that Detroit game like a playoff game. Obviously, we didn't have to go home, but the magnitude of that game was playoff level atmosphere. And you had 2 at-bats at it. Fortunately, you're only as good as your last at-bat at this league. Do I think to have a franchise tag or be in that 30 to 40 million a year? Absolutely. Is it something I want the Vikings to lock themselves into for the next 3-4 years? I don't think so.
So let's go on an assumption that is a very big reach, that JJ McCarthy is good to go in the eyes of Kevin O'Connell. Like, hey, it's time for the kid. Let's spend all our cap space on them guards and move forward. So trading Sam Darnold, is it simple or complicated to you? Because I think there's a few different ways that could go about it. One would just be a tag and trade. Is it possible to work out an extension with Darnold to then trade him to another team? The old extension and then trade, that seems to me that's got some moving parts, and you could be sort of left holding the bag there if something with the trade falls through. At the same time, the owner of Pittsburgh is talking about how, we got to make a choice between bringing Russ back and Justin Fields. And I just, what? That sounds horrible. That sounds like the worst options I've ever heard. Oh yeah, except for the other options for the Raiders. Now they bring in a 74-year-old coach, 74. Does he want a drafted third round quarterback or something to develop? Come on, right? He wants a win now quarterback. There's really only one guy who won 14 games last year and actually played really well, and that's Sam Darnold. So where do you stand on how they could trade him?
It's hard for me to think that you would work out a long-term multi-year deal for Sam Darnold with the anticipation of trading him. Now, it's possible, but usually you see those things as, hey, we're letting you go exercise a trade, and then the agent goes to the team, negotiates a contract with that team, and then executes the trade. It'd be one of those things where you have to make sure you didn't overprice yourself. I don't know if you can ask around the league, hey, what would you pay Sam Darnold? And then try and structure the contract that way. I think the easiest way to move Sam Darnold is hit him with the franchise tag and then let him go get an extension somewhere else.
Yeah, I think in the most ideal world, you would be able to go to, let's say, the Senior Bowl or the Combine, and you just bump into Tom Brady or whoever thinks they're running the Raiders, and you say, oh, I'm sorry, I dropped that near you. Oh, it's a piece of paper that says 3 years, 125 with 70 guaranteed. I don't know what those numbers mean, but they sound like a Darnold contract. Would you guys be happy with that? Philosophically speaking, I think that you can do something like that, but you can't really agree to it and lock it in until you're actually making that trade. But even if you were just say that you're going to the Raiders and they're like, okay, this is what we would pay for him. Here's the structure we want. You do the deal, then trade him to us. He's worth more that way because then they have him locked up and it's not a franchise tag. At the same time, they could always negotiate that deal with him there. But if he doesn't want to stay there, then they can't negotiate it with him, but he's got to agree to it anyway. There's a lot of moving parts to that. But if I'm the Raiders, I would prefer to have him already locked into a contract extension, or maybe it doesn't make that much of a difference. What would be your return? Well, let's just say it's the tag and trade. What would be your return?
My question for you then would be, why would the Raiders do that when he's going to be a free agent anyways? Right? If he's going to be a free agent anyways, why wouldn't I just go try and sign him to that deal, not have to give up anything on my end from a trades perspective, right? It's such a different conversation because he's not under contract, right? And so that's why I'm saying that if the Vikings work to extend him, Sam's going to squeeze every dollar out of them so that situation doesn't happen, right? He's not going to do the Vikings a favor. Hey, I'll sign this deal for you knowing that I'm going to the Raiders and you guys can get a second round pick for me or whatever. That's not how this business works. If that's the case, then I'll just hit free agency and I'll just sign with them anyways and you'll get nothing in return. right? That's where this gets a little bit sticky of you can't in goodwill talk to Sam Darnold with, oh, we want to extend you. And in the back of your mind, constantly going, but we're going to trade you, right? Guys will see right through that. I mean, any good agent would at least, and realize that's not the best play. So I have a really hard time seeing that working, because that would be some favors done on both sides.
Right. I was trying to work that out because it would be more favorable for the Vikings to be able to have that in their back pocket, that he's already extended, he's already signed. So now he is better for whoever's trading for him. But I guess if the Raiders wanted to do that, they could. The tag and trade, though, what's the return if that's the most likely thing? I don't think you could just let him walk, because there's so many QB needy teams. Who are they going to sign? They're going to say, no, we're good. We got Mac Jones for this year. We're fine. Like, no, you don't.
Daniel Jones is still in the building.
He is. And it's also a reason that I am skeptical. People have sort of decided that Daniel Jones is just going to be a Viking next year playing with JJ McCarthy. It's like, not with 7 teams that need quarterbacks. And even if you were Tennessee, let's say you're drafting Cam Ward, which I don't think is a good idea, but let's say you're doing it, then you're just going to leave him out there? No, you're probably going to want to develop him over a year, and probably going to want to have someone who helps you be competitive. And that's not Mason Rudolph, and it's not Will Levis. So you'd want someone like Daniel Jones. I think he's going to have a lot of phone calls that are not, hey, absolutely sit behind JJ McCarthy. Because if McCarthy's here and Darnold is gone, McCarthy is starting, and everyone, including Daniel Jones, knows that. But circling back, 2nd round pick, 2nd and a 3rd. What are we thinking?
I mean, the floor you can take for him is a 2nd. I don't think you can let him walk for less than that. I mean, a 2nd and next year's 3rd, maybe, something like that. Spread the picks out a little bit more, but there is a lot of quarterback needy teams, and the longer this goes in through the draft process here, the more kind of things spread out. Watching the quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl today, you're kind of a lot left to be desired. There's not even a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix in this class where I'm like, dude, slam dunk. Those dudes are going to be like first rounders and they're going to start right away. I mean, I was watching guys like Jalen Milroe today. Okay. Jackson Dart. All right. Riley Leonard. You're just like, I just don't see franchise put the shoulders of the franchise on and just roll with it here from any of these guys. And so if that's the case through the draft process, Sam Darnold is going to become more and more in demand as things go forward here. And teams would be willing to say, hey, instead of taking Jackson Dart in the 2nd this year, let's get Sam Darnold for a 2nd round pick this year and roll with everything else being rookies. That makes a lot more sense for me, for teams like Tennessee, for teams like the Raiders, maybe even Seattle. Don't go back with Geno Smith. There's a lot of teams themselves in that situation if they don't love the draft prospects this year.
So just in terms of tossing at you everything that I've talked about over the last week on the show since we last talked, where do you stand on what the Vikings should do at the running back position? Because the free agent list is not like it was last year. There is no Saquon Barkley. It's a lot of guys who are backups. Tariq Dowdle from the Dallas Cowboys, who's a guy, and he's pretty good, but he's not a superstar runner. Aaron Jones could return. That to me is very risky. 1st round is going to have some guys. 3rd round might have some guys. It feels like they're going to have to spend a draft pick on a running back.
Well, I'll take the word of my partner, Zach Zenner here. This is maybe one of the deepest running back classes in the last probably, 3 years, maybe even 10 years, right? There's going to be guys that have mid-round grades that go undrafted. Zach is under the impression, again, and he was a running back for Detroit for a long time. Now he's just a super physique model, but he thinks that every team will end up drafting a running back at one point this year, right? Every team, because there's so many good ones. You're going to get a guy like Corey Kiner from Cincinnati, could be a late round guy that could be a RB2 for you going into the year, right? So I do think that this is a really good, everything I just said about the quarterbacks, throw out the window and talk about the running backs. There is great running backs at every level of day 1 down to late day 3 that can come in and make immediate impacts for your team this year. So I do think they draft a running back. How high? I don't know.
Yeah, I think, with the 1st round, it is where you get special players, just always and forever, period. And the 3rd round, areas like that have produced plenty of Alvin Kamaras over the years that become star players, or Jonathan Taylor was a second rounder. So there's tons of stars in that range. The only issue is that the Vikings are short at corner, they're short at defensive tackle, they're short at guard, and is Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, who does lean on the analytical side, has been noted many times. Is he going to say, yeah, actually, it's a good idea to draft a running back? And if there are so many, is it plausible to draft one later on and still end up getting something out of that guy? But the thing is that the failure of Ty Chandler kind of has a domino effect here, where they were expecting that guy to be a 1A, 1B with Aaron Jones, and he ends up a Z. He's just nowhere close. And with Jones, he said repeatedly, hey, I want to be back in Minnesota. I love it here. And you got away with it for a year of a running back of his age, and he did fade down the stretch. I just don't know if you get away with it again after he had the football so much last year. And so there's the analytical part of me that's like, do it in the third round. I don't know. There's another part that says, if you have Omarion Hampton or Ashton Genty to go along with all these weapons, maybe it does maximize that guy in the same way that Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry were maximized for their teams.
Yeah, I mean, I'm never going to blame someone for drafting a running back in the first round if they are really sure that he can be the bell cow type of player. But as far as it comes with, comes a lot of risk with that piece of it. Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, the other guys that you talk about that are going in the first are generational talents, as people like to put tabs on them with. But I do think the Vikings need to, if they draft a running back, it needs to be a big back, right? I don't want to see them draft another 5'9", 185-pound running back that's going to get hurt. Right? If you're going to draft a running back, be one of the 6'2", the 6'3", 215 to 220 range. That's going to be more put together type of guy that can handle the beating of an 18-game season that takes in the NFL, because that's just what it takes anymore, is to be a bigger back that can just handle the bruises from the Bobby Wagners and the Alshires and those type of players. So, yeah, you got away with it, Aaron Jones. Definitely don't bank on getting away with it again, and bolster that position with a day 3 pick or a third-round pick of a big-time running back that maybe isn't a 4-4 guy, but it's going to be able to tote the rock. I can't remember the kid from Iowa, right? The kid from Iowa is everything that I would love in a running back. I mean, I would take him on the Vikings tomorrow if we could.
Caleb Johnson, yeah.
Caleb Johnson, thank you. You know I'm not great with names.
Yes. He was most of their offense. As usual, it's the running back, tight end, and punter is most of Iowa's offense. So here's one more subject I've been kind of talking about is if J.J. McCarthy does start at this moment, and this is something that we can go back to when we talk occasionally throughout the offseason or even when we get to next year's training camp, and is continuing to look at what expectations should be for next season. Because there's a part of me that's like, well, you won 14 games, so pedal to the metal, here we go. And they have all the cap space and all that stuff. But then there's another part that's like, do we got to be a little realistic here? Because when you compare where the Eagles roster is, that's the team that's representing the NFC. It's the best roster. The second best roster was in Detroit. And now the next best quarterback in the NFC is in Washington. And the NFC North is not going anywhere as far as its talent. It could get a lot better if Ben Johnson knows how to use a timeout on Thanksgiving or doesn't try to grow a weird beard and somehow think that changes anything, stuff like that. I mean, it's now suddenly a pretty rough road, I think, for the Vikings for 2025. They have to be that much better in order to get the same results. So what do you think as of this moment? And I know we're nowhere close, and we don't know the quarterback, and we don't know who's the interior guards that really win the championships. So tell me what a rational expectation should be, I guess, even for just this offseason.
I think a rational expectation for me is this is a double-digit win football team, right? There's enough talent right now that if J.J. McCarthy is not a complete slap, right? There's enough talent around him that you should win 10 games. You really should. I mean, between Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson and Darrisaw and O'Neal, there's enough talent there that if you don't just throw interceptions like crazy, you should be able to win 10 football games, right? And with Grenard and Ivan Pace and all the young talent on defense. But there is a scenario here in which J.J. McCarthy has a rookie-type season, and you're looking at an 8 to 9 win football team because you lose the turnover margin, because you're not scoring your plus 100 point differential or whatever it might be, and games become closer and your margin for error becomes even slimmer and all those things. But I do think the expectation moving forward is this needs to be a wild card type football team. I don't think going into next year, I'm comfortable to say that they're going to compete for the North again, unless Dallas, I mean, granted, Detroit loses both coordinators and some other stuff, but I just can't confidently go in to next season saying, yeah, the Vikings are going to win the North. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be tons of bumps in the road. And with all the question marks, specifically at the quarterback position, I just can't full-heartedly say I believe that.
And that's where I think it becomes important when they go into free agency, and you alluded to this earlier, is to sign multi-year players who are going to be part of a foundation and not just rentals who come in for a year, fill this spot. I mean, the Stephon Gilmore turns out to be a good signing, but at the end of the day, you go, well, now he's gone and he was 100 years old, and that didn't really get you ahead. So if you're looking at free agency, you want to be talking about a DJ Reed who's 27, signing a 4-year contract. He could be your shutdown corner for a long period of time. Or if we were talking about the offensive line, a Trey Smith, a Tevin Jenkins, these guys can play for you over multiple seasons. They're not Laken Tomlinson, who's 33 years old, and you're just trying to sort of jam him in there and hope. And it also gives you time, too, with multi-year free agents to draft a little better or to develop the guys that we don't have answers about. Kwesi is 3 drafts in. We only have answers on one of them, so we're going to find out. But to get answers, to know who your foundational pieces are, I think that that's an important thing. They did it last offseason. I suspect that they will do it again. Love to see it. Hate to see it. I mean, the hate to see it's pretty clear that the Super Bowl is just not something people are going to be too excited about. I mean, I'm excited to watch good football. I think it'll be good football. Aside from that, though, 2 weeks of zero storyline. Yes. Oh, the Eagles are back. Oh, Mahomes is back. You know, Mahomes is really good. Yeah. And that's it.
Yeah. 3-peat. Have you heard that? Have you heard they're going for 3 in a row? I agree with you completely. It's a bummer. And I'm trying to get myself out of the it's a bummer phase and into the, hey, I'm happy that I might get to witness a 3-peat for the first time in the history of ever. Right? It's one of those things where you can hate them. I had my fair share of drinking the haterade for the Kansas City Chiefs, but it's impossible not to respect Andy Reid and Mahomes and Kelsey and the greatness in which they have put on for this run for really the last 5 years. So as much as I agree with you, it's not fun to talk about. I respect the greatness to it. My hate to see it is, can we stop with the weird head coach introductory press conferences and Duval, right? Like, not good. Like, not good. Like, I give these dudes like a full week to get in the building, let them settle down. It's almost like the second they arrive, they're like, get out there, first impression, put your camera out there, and they just panic. Like, I think back to like Shane Steichen's original interview, and we're like, what are you talking about? Or the awkward when they're dapping up the players, or when Mike McDaniel FaceTime Tua, and he's like, yeah, we're going to win everything. And he's like, okay, I don't know who you are. Like, we have to figure out a way to put these head coaches in better positions so that people don't think, oh, this dude's toast 4 seconds into his tenure as a head coach.
And Jonathan Gannon, who appeared to think Budda Baker was Kyler Murray, which, I mean, if you never met before, it's a short guy. Like,
you don't have your helmet or number on.
Right. They don't have name tags around the facility. So, I went through that when I got the job covering the Vikings, where you go into the locker room and you're like, I hope he's standing next to his locker because I don't know what he looks like when I don't see him with the helmet on. So it's a little dicey there, but nobody could top Adam Gase, though, who seemed high on something and was all over the room. Yeah, so those are just a treat because they're go
train wrecks.
Awfully
They're
bad.
Just train wrecks. I can't remember the last. Even Ben Johnson was kind of weird, right? He's like, tell the players, get comfortable being uncomfortable. You're like, what is this, the program? Like, what are we talking about? This isn't a movie script, dude. Like, these are adults. This is their job. Yeah, we all understand it's uncomfortable to be in the NFL. We get it. We don't need you to go out there and slam it to the world now. Like, I don't know. I just think that it can be handled so much better. I don't know, maybe prep these guys a little bit better when they're going there. But it also shows why not everyone needs to be in front of a microphone all the time.
Well, they better get used to it because they have to stand there 4 times a week during the season. So, that's part of Kevin O'Connell had a pretty easy transition to that because he's a big talker and big communicator and everything. And one thing I will say is, everyone, in terms of hate to see it, everyone tries to form an opinion when a coach get hired. They try so hard. This is going to be a disaster. This guy, oh, what a middling hire. Who cares? And I would just look at last year with Dan Quinn. Nobody cared. Nobody thought it was a good hire. Oh, well, that's not getting anybody hyped. And when Dan Campbell was hired, everyone thought this is the stupidest man alive. Like, what is he talking about? Biting other people and stuff? This is just a psycho. And you just never really know. Winning the press conference doesn't really do a heck of a lot for you. But these guys aren't cheerleaders. They're football coaches. So they're like, Duval. How do you say it?
Dude,
what am I supposed to do?
The eye raise, everything else. Like, buddy, you could have walked in front of the mirror 2 or 3 times and been like, Duval, get super into it. No, you had to this high-pitched eyebrow raise, body lean. I was like, this is going to haunt you for a long time, my friend.
You know what it was? It was like, I'm Ron Burgundy. Ron Burgundy? Yeah,
there's a question mark at the end of the teleprompter.
Yes,
Duval?
Yes. Who do you think will be the best new hire?
Ooh, probably Schottenheimer for the Cowboys. No, kidding. I want to say Ben Johnson, right? And mostly because I want that guy to succeed, right? What he did in Detroit with Jared Goff and how he built that offense and the creativity and all that. I root for those kind of guys that are their first at bats, right? Their first at bats. You hope it goes well because you never know when they're going to be that position again. So I really want Ben Johnson to hang in there and turn that thing around with Caleb Williams and be able to put a name in the flag of I'm not just a great X's and O's guy, but I'm also a very good head ball coach, right? So I do think that he has the most tools to succeed right now, right? The dark horse for me, though, is Vrabel. Right, a dude that knows how to coach, been to the playoffs, back in his home building, going to build that thing the right way up, has all his infrastructure around. I mean, he could be a guy that turns that place around, kind of like Harbaugh did with the Chargers. And we're talking about the Patriots being competitors in the North again next year.
East. That's who I was going to pick. I was going to pick the Patriots because what we saw from Drake May was that he survived that first year and was actually an exciting player who put them in position to win. And if he could do that with that situation, with a coach who was in over his head, no weapons, and they've got cap space and they've got things to work on. The most perplexing to me is Pete Carroll with the Raiders. It's just, I don't know, guys. I don't see how you're winning. I don't see even if it's Darnold playing quarterback, who's catching the ball? Do you have I don't know. Pete Carroll's defense was passed by, and that's why he got fired. So is he going to adjust that, or is it going to be like Zimmer being like, I'm back, guys, Zim ball? And then it's like, nah, Zim ball was over 3 years ago, and we all moved on. I think that could happen to Pete Carroll.
Yeah, and I mean, all we talked about really at Pete's end of his tenure with Seattle was how good of a CEO he was. Right? He hired good people around him, and so it's going to be really important who he puts for his staff members, that they're good X's and O's guys, because I don't really know how good of an X and O guy Pete is anymore. I mean, obviously the dude's incredible. He's been in the game forever, but what he did in Seattle was really just kind of manage the personalities of the players and be the exciting guy. I mean, Alex Boone obviously played for him, said he was great, but he needs to have slam dunk coordinator hires that are going to be able to scheme stuff up, because that's not what Pete's about. The Schottenheimer, who's the Cowboys guy? Yeah, that was the most perplexing one for me, right? You let McCarthy walk and then you promote from within. I don't get that one at all, unless he's truly just like, listen, you're a placeholder until Dak's contract gets to the point where we can trade him. Then we'll go hire the new coach and draft the new guy. But I do think that that wasn't a very desirable job for a lot of the head coaching candidates, because you know Jerry Jones is going to be over your shoulder. You know that he's going to have his press conference every week. Like, if you want to go be a guy, especially like a Ben Johnson type, and plant your flag for the first time as head ball coach, you want to do it your way. And if you go to Dallas, you're doing it Jerry's way.
And I think Jerry's way is getting a little bit more, how do you put it politely? Like, Jerry is getting a lot older, and it makes a lot less sense when he talks to the media now. And his introduction, or when he was asked about Schottenheimer being hired, he just wouldn't even talk about him. And it's like, what is going on here? And is his son competent? Not that there's any nepotism in football or that it ever causes any problems, but is this guy really the leader of the franchise that's going to do it the right way for them? They seem to be kind of in peril there. And yet the irony of it is they still have a ton of talent, and they could still be a playoff team next year, but suddenly the winds have shifted in the NFC East and they are good now. Let me throw two more quick. I hate to see it. I am exhausted of people pointing out that the Giants had Saquon Barkley and let him go. If Saquon Barkley plays for the Giants, he averages 4.25 yards per carry, and they win 4 games because they were terrible. They did the right thing. The Giants did the right thing. They tanked. They got rid of expensive players who they weren't going to use, and they went to other places and they played well, but there was no point to signing those guys. There was no point to franchise tagging Saquon again or something. It would have been insane. So the way it's worked out is embarrassing. It was better for their franchise. It was the right thing to do. And everyone's like, Giants, that'll teach you to let him go. It's like, well, he was a free agent, number one, so he didn't have to sign with you anyway, nor was he going to, because he had known what they were going to do. That's just gotten so tiresome. Other thing, love to see it. Something finally went right for Taylor Swift. I mean, it's just, she's had a lot. No, wait, it didn't. But love to see it. She's made a relationship last over multiple years. So good for her when it comes to that. And truly love and hate to see it, actually, with Brian Flores not getting a head coaching job. Hate it for him. Love it for the Vikings.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sad. I think he deserves to be a head coach in the National Football League, but I'm very happy he's back. Very similar to, I'm glad Cliff Kingsbury did not take a head coaching job, because I think he's a great coordinator. Do what you're good at, right? Do the Ben Johnson thing. Come back, finish what you started. Don't leave your rookie quarterback who you can have so much fun with next year when he's not a rookie anymore. I love when guys are self-aware enough to go, I should do this one more year, right? Instead of putting yourself for a position where you may not succeed or you're comfortable, right? So I'm happy for that, but I am happy Brian Flores is back, but I do think he deserves to get a shot at being a head coach again at one point.
All right, Jeremiah Sirles, next week when we talk, I'll have some fun. Maybe, we'll probably talk each other into stuff with the Vikings in the NFL and start to preview the offseason. And then after that, we'll have a Super Bowl, and it'll be another year in the books for Tuesday morning left guard. So thank you for taking the time from the Senior Bowl and using all of your phone's data to connect here today. And we will talk again next week. Thank you, sir.
Anytime. Football.